I really don't know how to start this, but all I can really say is that the summer was a roller coaster. There's so many mixed emotions and feelings, but the month of July was probably the worst month I've ever experienced. Besides the year I lost my little brother back in 2015. I lost him due to a car accident, which led our family to terrible heartbreak. He was the youngest of us all, only 19 years old, and he still had so much ahead of him. But that's another story. The month of July was pretty terrible. Not only because I had COVID, but my father passed away. I remember when my mom first started showing symptoms, I was really scared for my dad and kids, especially for my dad since he suffered from end-stage kidney failure, hypertensions, and heart complications, and he was on dialysis 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. He was always cautious. Even before this whole COVID thing started, he would come home, take his shoes off outside, leave them out there, come in, leave his blanket and clothes in the garage for him to wash later on. Then he would go upstairs in his undershirt and underwear and would either shower right away or put on some nice, comfy, clean clothes. Then he would come back downstairs, grab something to eat, and head back up to his room. It was mostly like a routine on the days he had dialysis. But there were days where he would just go straight to his room and not come down because dialysis was really exhausting to his body physically and mentally. And he was always sick. I mean, always had a terrible cough, diarrhea, vomiting, and other symptoms, but those were the worst ones. To me, this was normal since he's been on dialysis for the last 5 years. My dad was always sick. He couldn't get any better unless he had a kidney transplant. He was actually on the donor list waiting for an organ. It can take years though, so. Yeah. So I got sick the day after my mom got sick. I had a feeling it was COVID because I've never really been that sick. It wasn't like a regular flu. My whole body ached. I had terrible headaches that lingered all day. I had a dry cough, stomach ache, fatigue, loss of taste and smell, diarrhea, vomiting, congested nose, fever. Oh, a really, really high fever. To the point where I literally thought I was gonna die. I remember one of the days where I was laying down, burning up with fever chills. My dad just came home from dialysis. He saw me laying there. That's when it hit him. He started crying, literally crying out loud, praying to God that I get better. I normally never saw or heard my dad cry, so hearing him cry, screaming, praying to God really broke me. I knew he was suffering. I knew he was hurt, and he felt helpless because he could do nothing for me. He couldn't get near me because that meant he had a higher chance of getting infected. He wanted to call an ambulance so that they could take me to the hospital, but I didn't want to. I was scared. I was scared of dying alone in a hospital. I heard so many cases where people would go to the hospital and end up dead a couple days later, so I said no. I'd get better soon. My mom was there next to me crying as well, suffering and in pain. She had the virus as well, so it was like we both were taking care of each other, but that day, it really felt terrible. I didn't think my fever would go down, but eventually it did. I was glad it did because it gave them comfort and hope that I would get better. I remember telling my dad to go upstairs and get some rest because he had just gotten back, and well, I didn't want to have to get close contact with him. He didn't listen though. He sat on the couch while I laid on the bed downstairs. I could hear him praying. Eventually, I fell asleep and he went upstairs. However, my fever was always lingering. I actually didn't know how we would be okay because it was 6 people living in a small 2-bedroom apartment. My mom slept downstairs in her bed. My dad had his own room, and me and the kids and their dad slept in another room. My son had a bed and a cot in the walk-in closet because we didn't want him sleeping next to us so he wouldn't get sick. My daughter slept in and out of her crib and on the bed with us. I'd read if babies got infected that it wouldn't be as bad, and that was really the case for us. She only had a fever for like 2 days, and thankfully she didn't get any worse. But my son got sick easily, so I knew having him isolated from us would be the best thing to do. He always wore a mask, always washed his hands, put on some hand sanitizer. Thankfully, he knew how to fend for himself. He knew how to warm up his own food. And to be honest, if it wasn't for him helping us out, I don't know how we would have managed. He literally would bring us water or Gatorade or anything to eat so we had energy enough to get up and use the restroom. I remember his grandpa bought us medicine and oranges, and he just took the bag upstairs with him because he loved oranges. Oh God, it was so hard for us because we were the adults and we weren't doing our jobs of parenting. But I mean, he took it like a champ. He managed to understand and help us out. He was brave through it all. I do recall there was a time where he was crying because he wanted to hug us and kiss us, but couldn't. Oh, it really broke my heart because I wanted to hug him and kiss him so bad. I believe I forgot to mention, but Greg, my husband, also got COVID. It's only bound to happen as we slept in the same room. Pretty much had all the same symptoms I had. Anyway, Noah was our definition of a hero. During those times, our sweet little boy managed to survive with us being extremely sick. But days passed, and little by little, we could feel ourselves getting better. Towards the end of the month on Wednesday, I remember my dad coming home, and he said he felt sick. And I thought to myself, there's no way he could get infected. He literally isolated himself and was very cautious all the time. He had really bad diarrhea and a fever, and I checked his temperature and it was at 100 degrees. I told him to take a sip of Gatorade and to go shower. He said he couldn't because he felt weak. So I told him to rest and not cover himself with blankets. A few hours passed and he called me to help him. He was trying to sit up on his bed but couldn't because he was so weak. To me, it was normal because he was always sick after dialysis, and eventually I sat him up and I was the one bringing him food because he was weak. I scheduled a test for him for Friday, July 31st. The next day, he called me again to help him up. He fell off his bed trying to go to the bathroom. Helped him. I was trying to take him to the bathroom, but he couldn't even take a step. He was extremely weak. Mind you, I was better, but I still felt weak. So he felt like super heavy to me. So he managed to throw himself on the bed and just laid down. The way he landed, put his legs up, and I told him to rest. It was around 6 p.m. I brought him his dinner and told him to eat as much as he could. Eventually he got up and managed to use the restroom. I remember Noah coming in the room laughing, saying my dad was wearing purple underwear. And we were like, wait, what? Like, how do you know? And he said, I just saw him get out of the bathroom with his purple underwear. Oh, hearing that gave me some relief because I was like, wow, he'd even call me for help. So I figured he started feeling better. I didn't check on him after that since I figured he was better. Noah wanted to go in his room and watch TV, so we let him. I figured it would be better than being in the walk-in closet. And so he was with him for a couple hours. My dad was resting and eventually sleeping. So Noah came back in the room around 9 or 10 p.m. The next day was Friday, which meant dialysis day for him. This is where all went downhill. I remember waking up to a hard knocks on my door. It was my mom. She shockingly said, "Honey, I think your dad is dead." I immediately got up and I was like, "What?" And she said it again. I started crying and went to his room and saw he was laying down sideways, only wearing his undershirt and underwear. The purple underwear Noah laughed about. I touched his legs and he was cold and stiff. I didn't really know how to react because the only thing I could think of was to cover him with a towel that I saw there and hug him and try to keep him warm. His body was literally freezing. Part of me really thought I could bring him back by warming him up. I tried waking him and it was impossible for me to get his hand out from under his head. It was the worst feeling ever. I was just hugging him, trying to wake him, thinking that this can't be happening. He was getting better. How could this happen? I eventually grabbed his phone and called 911, and they told me to lay him flat, and I was like, he's dead. My dad is dead, and I can't move him. He's so cold and stiff. I stayed on the phone with the operator until someone arrived, and I was so scared. Both my mom and I were just crying, hugging each other. Part of me felt so guilty. I feel like maybe I could have done more. But I know I really couldn't. I didn't want to take him to the hospital, and he didn't want to go either. We really thought he'd be fine. Like he always managed to be after he got sick from dialysis, and that's what happened.